Hey, David Raffoff here. Just want to do a quick video on kind of a common pattern that you'll run across when you're working really in any kind of like JS application. Um, I, it's something that's kind of easy to not include on your first pass, but eventually you probably want to go back and include it. And I just, on an app I was working on, I just recently ran into needing access to some things and uh, at first couldn't realize like why I didn't have access to those things, and then I realized I was just kind of missing this step in my process. So I thought I'd just kind of run through that here real quick. But basically, it's serializing and deserializing. So normally, when you're working on front end code and you're making calls to APIs, you're just getting back a bunch of JSON data that you turn into objects that you can use. Um, and you might do something like a GET request, and then whatever you get back from that GET request, you're just going to patch into or save into your state, however you're going to do it. In Angular with NGXS, I would just do patch state and save all these transfers that I'm getting in my store. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, however you would be saving those in your application, this is still going to apply. So what happens when you're doing that is you're just getting a whole bunch of essentially just JavaScript objects, or potentially even just a big string of the string representation of the JSON. And that's just going to be dumb data, right? Like there's not going to be any functionality in there. It's just the data. And one thing that you'll want to do a lot of times when you're working on the front end is actually, take the data and put it into the shape, the form that you want to use, and add any functionality. So essentially taking the data and converting it to models. So basically deserializing the data that you're getting from your API calls. So here, in this case, I had just a couple things I was playing around with that I wanted to add to these transfers. And I already had the idea of a transfer model in my system. So whenever through the UI you're creating one of these transfers, I actually just generate a model for it. So I kind of had this disconnect. Like when I was getting information from the server, I was just getting JavaScript objects, but on the in the UI when I was creating things, I was getting real models. So it just got into the state where things were kind of goofy. So so basically I just introduced this step here for deserializing the data that I'm getting into my actual models, my actual transfer models here, and then just using that from that point on. And so at that point, everything's pretty consistent through the rest of the system. And there's different ways you can go about doing it, but for now, I just went ahead and added some static methods here to deserialize. So this one takes the raw object and it just creates a new transfer with all of the properties that I'm expecting to come over the wire. And then kind of the analogous thing below here is I can also serialize, transfer, and just return an object that has everything I would expect to be able to pull off of a real transfer object. It may not want to send all this info, but it's here if you need it. And you can see there's a couple other things that I've got tacked on here where I'm calling methods to get values. And probably ideally it'd be good to like pull these out into serializer objects and deserializer objects. But for now, it was just easy to throw them in this, just throw them right in the model, since that's kind of where the work's happening anyway. But you can see right away by having access to the model, I have access to some additional things like this amount method and a modifiers method, but it could be anything. So a common thing you might get is like a list of people, and you might get first name and last name, and you want to have a method that just gives you like full name, or you might get a date in some representation. You might want a method to be able to show that in a nice, more presentable way. So this these transformations kind of apply to really pretty much any objects you'd probably be sending over the wire. with API calls. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a simple technique, but it just gives you a simple way to work consistently with the models that are relevant to your front end client application from the time that you get them over the wire throughout the process. There are some places too where using serialize is handy throughout my application. So like, for example, if I'm using reactive forms and I want to use form builders and groups, it's only going to accept values. So here I couldn't do like a method call, for example, for amount. Like I actually need to send in transfer dot amount. So in this case, it's helpful for me to be able to deserialize, to serialize, send that data into this form, and then when it's submitted, I just deserialize it again. See if we can see that up here. So yeah, before I set up that form, I'm serializing the model. And then when I do, trying to see where I actually use it in here. Here we go. So when I actually get like the values from the form, I take the value off the form object and then deserialize that, and basically get back an actual transfer object, which you can see here. So yeah, it's just a little simple technique, but it sets it up so you can add, you can treat your, you're not just working with raw data. You can actually set up models that have some logic to them and behave the way you want them to behave on the front end, which may not be exactly the same way as the back end, if assuming you have control over that. But yeah, thanks for watching this. If you have any questions on this or comments, things you'd like clarified, just leave a comment in the video. If you're interested in getting more videos like this, subscribe and click the bell for notifications for when more videos like this come out. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.